Hello, everyone. Welcome in the Full Court Trap Podcast. We got a little Southeastern version of the Full Court Trap Podcast today. We're going to be talking mainly about all the action that went down in the best conference in the country this year, at least. And it's been a wild week, Blake. A lot of stuff went down, and we'll get right into it with arguably the biggest headline of them all back on Tuesday night when we saw the Auburn Tigers go down against Texas A&M. Texas A&M defended their home court over there in College Station. Finally got a win against the AP #1 team, their first ever in the history of their program. Wade Taylor got his jersey put up in the rafters. That was a interesting sight to behold for a guy who's still actively playing. But specifically on the game, I mean, Auburn, it will be noted they didn't have Denver Jones, which is a big part to what they do defensively. It can't be undermined how valuable he is, but they still had enough to go out and win this game. And really, they didn't play horribly. They shot the ball well, but at times it kind of looked a little bit disjointed, and A&M kind of put the pressure on them, really. And this was also an A&M team, Blake, that was desperate coming off of a 3 or 4 game losing skid. I forget how much it was exactly, but they needed this one bad.
Yeah, it was a 4-game losing streak, and A&M ended up just coming out and maintaining the, what would I say, the lead basically all game. Auburn didn't lead once in this game. I mean, that's just unbelievable. So you got to give a lot of credit to the Aggies in this one. Also, Texas A&M out-rebounded offensively, 24-9 on the offensive glass. So, I mean, when you're generating second-chance points like that, then, I mean, that's just kind of a crazy thing. And then, like I said, A&M led the entire game. And that has not really been a sight we've been used to all season with Auburn, minus their 2 other losses, plus the third, which is this game. But, yeah, A&M unbelievably played game. They kept Janai Broom in check, who's kind of looked a bit off in the past couple games. They kept Miles Kelly in check. He had 12 points, but, I mean, he shot 1-8 from the field.
Yeah, 10 for 10 from free throws. Golly.
Yeah, that's ugly. And then Wade Taylor for the Aggies, after getting his jersey retired, he did Wade Taylor things, shot 5 of 15 from the field. He did what he had to, though, in this one at 16 points. Hit a couple big shots. Zurich Phelps off the bench, really, really good. Shot a little inefficient, but 19 off the bench is more than pleasable when you're facing off against one of, if not the best teams in the past, 25 years.
Yeah, it's a weird game because when you look at it on paper, Auburn, they shot 50% from the field. They got to the line a decent amount of times, but A&M, they just were scrappy. They got to the line about 25 times on the night. Really kind of inefficient shooting-wise, only hit the 43% margin from the field and 36% from three, but they controlled the tempo and they got the plays that they had to have. And Zurich Phelps, I really want to put the light on him here because that 19-point performance really helped them out off the bench. Pharrell Payne, he had 12 off the bench as well. That was a big-time performance for them. 5 for 7 from the field, came in, was efficient. And those guys really carried the load off the bench. You didn't get anything really from Solomon Washington, CJ Wilcher, and then Wade Taylor, obviously. I mean, 5 for 15. That's a Wade Taylor shooting split if I've ever seen one. But you got to give credit to Manny Obasaki. He had an efficient 10. And then, it was just really an overall well-played performance there for Buzz Williams' squad. I think a lot of this has to do with just the fact that they were so desperate to get a win. And this was a bad spot for Auburn, too, as well, because they were coming off the high of getting their first win at Rupp Arena, and God knows how long. They clinched the SEC title after Alabama lost on that buzzer beater to Tennessee. Blake, it kind of seems like this Auburn team might have been a little bit hungover from the high of clinching a regular season championship, to be quite honest.
That's what it seems like. I'm not going to lie. I mean, they're not really playing for anything else in this regular season. Maybe they're trying to coast the last 2 games. But, it did seem like they were just coming off a big program win, and it just didn't seem like they were as focused as they should have been. And I mean, I don't think it's anything to be worried about. A&M's still a really, really well coached team. They've continued to be a really good team all year. And, I mean, they were kind of bound for a bounce-back win after going down 4 games straight. So,
Yeah, it was a big trap spot for Auburn. And I will note, though, this is 2 back-to-back kind of underwhelming performances for Janai Broome. And a lot of the conversation shifted now, Blake. We talked about Janai Broome kind of being the runaway favorite for Player of the
Cooper
Year.
Flag now.
Yeah, that's really switched in the last couple of games. Cooper Flag, he's starting to kind of take over the reins there with the last couple of games for Broome. I'm not concerned about him just yet because he's been so consistent all season long. I think Janai's earned the slack to have 2 kind of off games and not really be discredited. But that this is going to be something I think that's worth monitoring because we are about to head in to the SEC tournament, and Auburn has a big-time regular season finale here hosting Alabama on Saturday. Another team that's coming off a loss that we'll talk about soon. But what's the concern level here with Janai? Because to be honest with you, mine's probably at about a 3. Like, I'm not super worried at all. But, I mean, you do have to point out that he hasn't really been playing up to the standard that we've expected from him. But that standard is also extremely high.
I'd put it at a 0, to be honest with you, Luke, just because of the fact that, like, that team is just so deep as a whole. Like, if one guy, Janai still had like 9 and 7 on the game, which, I mean, it isn't National Player of the Year numbers, but, I mean, he wasn't the guy in that game. You're not going to always be the guy in, like, every game. Because, I mean, like, literally, just look at their roster top to bottom. Chad Baker-Mazar, Miles Kelly, Tahad Pettiford, Denver Jones when healthy. Like, the list keeps going with other guys besides Broome. So, I mean, it just wasn't Broome's game. And A&M's a super physical, well-gifted defensive team. So, I mean, it's really nothing to, like, put your head down about. I think he should bounce back here with that Bama game. Bama, as we've seen, they're really, really bad defensively, and it continues to be a trend. So, I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, it's definitely been a trend for that Alabama team and for Auburn as well. I mean, the bench production really wasn't there. Nobody off the bench really eclipsed more than about 4 points. Chaney Johnson, he got the most run time, but he didn't really play to that kind of role player coming off the bench standard that he's lived up to. He's been a very quality piece off the bench for them. But if you're a Texas A&M fan, you got to be thrilled about this. I mean, first win, like I said, against an AP number 1. I'm pretty sure that moved them up a whole seed line in Lenardi's bracketology and in the eyes of the selection committee as well. I would have to imagine they're taking that win into extremely high value because, I mean, this is an Auburn team that has not stumbled too many times this year, and every time they have stumbled, it's been to a very quality team like Duke and Florida. So hell of a win for A&M. That can't be discredited whatsoever. They needed it in the worst way. That losing streak was going to get really ugly if it extended past that game. But now they don't have to worry about that, and they can put all their focus in on the regular season finale. I forget who they have off the top of my head, but A&M obviously stocks high on them. But there was some other big-time matchup this week in the SEC, so we'll get on to that. I think most notably it isn't really the ranked teams that comes in next at this headline in the SEC, but Texas and Oklahoma, these are 2 teams that have been firmly on the bubble for the last better part of a month now, and they got huge wins for their tournament hopes this week. Texas obviously went on the road to Starkville and got an OT thriller win against Mississippi State. And then last night, Wednesday, Oklahoma, they defended home court and got a double-digit win against Missouri. So if you wanted to find your way into the tournament, Blake, these 2 teams, they had to have this, and now – on Saturday, it sets up a big storyline because those 2 teams are going to be playing against each other in the regular season finale. And, I mean, we've seen this rivalry. It's super bitter when it comes to football, and now we've got the dramatics in basketball as well because these 2 teams are fighting for their bubble lives. And I think that this matchup's going to be extremely crucial in determining who might have the edge when it comes to punching their ticket on Selection Sunday.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is going to be, like, freaking all-out war between 2 teams in the South. I mean, they're both in the first 4 out as of the 4th. So 2 days ago, they were in the first 4 out. But I'd assume Oklahoma's sitting in the last 4 in right now. Haven't looked at Joe Lenardi's like newest saying from yesterday or today that he always does with like the daily ones that he doesn't like fully publish on the ESPN website. But I do think this game is going to be awesome, man. Like, this is what March is all about.
Hell yeah. I'm trying to pull up Lenardi's latest bracketology. Okay, we got an update as of 6 hours ago. So right now, where things currently stand, both these teams are on the first four out per Joey brackets. Oklahoma, they are the last team left out of the field as of today. Texas follows behind them, coming in at that third team left out on the first four out line, and then North Carolina and Nebraska round this thing out. So in Joe Lenardi's eyes, there's still work to be done, and obviously, when you're playing head to head against two teams that are on the same line in terms of the bubble, it's going to be crucial. But in terms of just the wins that we saw between these two teams, Blake, which one was more impressive in your eyes? Because Texas, I mean, you got the road factor. They went into Starkville and they got one done in overtime as well. But Missouri, I mean, we've seen what they're capable of at their best. And Oklahoma really had control of the game from start to finish and ended up with the 12-point win. So I don't think you can go wrong when talking about either of these wins as the better of the two. But which one was the most impressive in your eyes?
I definitely think it was Oklahoma. I mean, Jeremiah Fears had 31 on the night on an efficient 9 of 13 from the field. Like, when this kid's going and he's like going really well in the court, then he's one of the best freshmen in college basketball right now. Like, it's hard to stop him. And then when you're talking about like the Texas game at Mississippi State, I don't think Starkville is like as crazy of a place to play as like some of us saw it like early on in the season, just because I don't know, it doesn't seem as like vicious as a road environment as we thought. But yeah, I do think this Oklahoma game is the better game just because of how hot Missouri's been and just because of how bad Oklahoma's luck has been. I feel like lately they've lost some games that they probably should have won, and then Missouri had been hot all season long. They had that win recently against Bama where they put up 110 points on Alabama. Yeah, Alabama's a bad defensive team, but I mean, you're putting up 110 on a top three team in the country. I mean, you're doing something really well over there. So props to Dennis Gates, but even more props to Porter Moser in this one.
Yeah, I think I'm riding with Oklahoma on this one for the more impressive win. But I will say for Texas, Trey Johnson, man, he is elite as elite gets when it comes to scoring. 6 for 9 from three, 8 for 16 from the field, 23 points on the night. And then you look around on those box scores. Tremont Mark, 24 off the bench. Gosh, if they play like that, I think that they're going to take down Oklahoma this weekend. We'll save the predictions for our weekend preview outlook, but man, the Red River Rivalry Basketball Edition, it's got more stakes than I think it's ever had, really, because this is a big-time matchup. These teams both need this win desperately, and I'd say they may need to do some work in Nashville as well to feel comfortable about hearing their name called. But this was a great start, obviously, with two quad one wins against ranked opponents. Can't go wrong there. I'm very impressed with what I saw out of those two squads. But moving on from that, we had a stunner last night, Blake. Ole Miss, they took down the Vols. I called this one on the preview for the week, so I don't want to toot my own horn or anything, but this felt like a trap spot for Tennessee. They were coming off the high of Jemai Mashak's buzzer beater against the Crimson Tide, and then they've got to go into a road environment, senior night in the SEC. I mean, we've said it all season long. SEC road environments, never a guarantee. You never know what can happen. And Jamin Brakefield, he had the game winner that put him up 2. And then Igor Milicic, he narrowly missed a layup that would have sent the game to overtime. Wasn't meant to be for the Vols. And Ole Miss picks up a huge win, a really nice piece of their resume as they look to try to better their seed in the NCAA tournament and the SEC standings. So, Blake, what stood out to you in this matchup? This was a thriller all the way down the stretch, and it just wasn't meant to be for Tennessee last night.
Honestly, the biggest thing that stood out to me is like how well the Ole Miss dominated the paint. Their points in the paint comparison was 46 points for Ole Miss in the paint compared to Tennessee's 20. So, I mean, that's just smash mouth basketball. Like, there's no stopping that. Tennessee, like with the bigs they have, I mean, that's kind of crazy that they allowed that many points in the paint just because of how good that front court has been all season long, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
So for Ole Miss to come in or to host Tennessee in this one and get that big upset, such a big win, especially when they went unranked recently. struggled some in SEC play. They're 10-7. I don't know if I want to say struggle, but I mean down the stretch they definitely have had some like semi struggles. I don't think enough can be said about Jamin Brakefield as well in this one. 19 points, 8 of 9 from the field. Has some big free throws in the game. Malik Dia was really, really good at 13 on 5 of 7 from the field. And then as well as Gray Davis and Matthew Morrell, both chipping in double-digit points. So, I mean, it was just an overall really well-played game by Ole Miss. I don't think this is one for Tennessee to really be like super upset about because, I mean, it's a road environment.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah, Jamin Brakefield, you mentioned that a point total for him. All those points came in the last 11 minutes of the game as well.
Yeah,
So he really
unreal.
kicked it into takeover mode, to coin a 2K term there, because that was unreal watching him go to work down the stretch. And this one did make some things interesting for Tennessee because the race for a double bye in Nashville, Missouri sits a game back now of Tennessee. Now, Tennessee will have the tiebreaker, I believe, where they got that win at Thompson Bowling. So I don't know how all those tiebreaker things work out, but that did put them kind of at a little bit of a reach from Alabama now, and Alabama's got to play Auburn. So there's going to be a lot of chaos to figure out what this whole seed line is going to look like in Nashville next week, and it's going to be really fun to see unfold. Chaz Lanier, he had a decent night for Tennessee. Not really anything crazy scoring output-wise like we've seen when he got on a heater at Texas A&M early. Jordan Gainey, though, he came off the bench and put up big minutes for the Vols, got 17 off the bench. But just too much for them to overcome with Jamin Brakefield and Malik Dia, just all those guys over at Ole Miss. They played their butts off on senior night, and they needed that win for resume purposes, and that was big time for them. But I'll tell you about big time, Blake, the Florida Gators. That's another one I called Chomp Chomp. Todd Golden and Alex Condon, Walter Clayton, they went into the swamp. Or not the swamp, excuse me. They went into Coleman Coliseum, coming from the swamp, and pulled off that win against Alabama. High-scoring affair again. Not surprising to see Alabama giving up nearly 100 points. That's kind of become the norm with this team as long as they're not playing against a team that's subpar offensively. But, Blake, we got to talk about the Florida Gators here because I think when you talk about the tiers of Final Four contenders and national title contenders, it's Auburn and Duke, and then the gap between them and Florida's getting like right there. I think Florida's just as good as Duke and Auburn, and I think that they may be up there in terms of the title contenders. They've been on a heater the last month. They ranked third in Bart Torvik, only behind Duke and Houston, and last night they put a stamp on what's been a really dominant last month for them.
You want me to be honest with you, Luke? I don't really think there's like any gap like as of March 6th today. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's much of a gap anymore between Auburn, Duke, and Florida. I mean, this Florida team, just top to bottom, they look really, really, really honed in on both sides of the floor. I mean, they did allow 94 points, so I don't know about both sides of the floor. I might have just screwed up there. My bad, full court trap enthusiast. But Walter Clayton, Will Richard, Alex Condon, and Elijah Martin. Then you got Thomas Howe off the bench. I mean, all these guys are really, really good. Like, it's a legit team. I do think national championship talks need to be more talked about with this group. Alex Condon looks like a NBA first-rounder, lottery pick, potentially maybe late first round. What he's able to do, especially in that Alabama game last night, was kind of surreal to see him in 27-10, 9 of 16 from the field, 2 blocks. Like, he was unbelievable. Walter Clayton shot a bit inefficient, but I mean, still had 22 against a really good Bama team. Elijah Martin, consistent as always. So yeah, and then you got Thomas Howe off the bench with 12 on really efficient shooting splits. So I do think this Florida team is going to be tough to stop. With SEC play coming to a close, the tourney coming up, and then the national tournament coming up.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, Blake, since this podcast started, we were talking in the preseason about teams we thought America was too low on. I said Florida was going to make some noise, and man, they've been better than even I imagined they would be. That was probably the best take I've had on this podcast so far this year. But man, there's just so much to like about this team. In the backcourt, you've got bucket getters at every spot. Walton Clayton Jr., Elijah Martin, Will Richard, like you said. Any of those guys on any given night can give you 20 plus, and sometimes multiple of them can do it on any given night. And then you go to the front court. Alex Condon last night with 27. I mean, he's been one of the better interior presences in the conference when it comes to the SEC. He's averaging 11 and 7 on the year. He's just a sophomore as well, so he's going to continue to grow in that Florida program, assuming the NIL doesn't come calling at any other destinations. But I really like what I've seen out of him this year. He's been a force at times. And then Ruben Chinyelu, he's been very serviceable at the 4 spot as well. He makes the plays that you need out of him. He doesn't really do anything flashy, but he is feasting on the boards, and he gets points in the paint. And then you look to the bench. I mean, Thomas Hall, like you said, Denzel Aberdeen. There's just so much to like about this team. They've got Micah Hand-Lockton back. He burned that medical red shirt after the brutal injury last year, and he's starting to put in some quality minutes for him. And this team, the wins too, the road win against Auburn. Now you got this road win against Alabama. They beat Tennessee by 30. They beat Texas A&M by 19. Really, the only bad loss I can say that they have this year probably comes in that Georgia game, and even then they almost fought their way all the way back to steal that one. So I think that the ceiling is just unlimited with this group, and I'm super high on them as we turn the page here heading into conference play. They're going to finish the season with Ole Miss in the swamp. But Blake, it's like you said, I think that in this last month or so, they've really emerged and kind of closed the gap between them and some of the elite teams like we've talked about with Auburn and Duke.
Wait, what was that?
I was saying Florida's really closed the gap between Duke and Auburn, I think. Like you said, there isn't a gap anymore. I think there's still kind of a little bit of a gap, but I mean, they did go
really
into
getting
Auburn's
super partial. It's getting super partial now. Like Auburn,
Yeah.
I mean, they did blow out Kentucky. Kentucky's injury plagued. But I mean, down the stretch, I don't know if they're trying to coast through SEC play right now, or if they're just not locked in, or if like these other teams are really just starting to like catch up with them. I don't know what the answer is. It's hard to tell right now. I guess we'll see like here within the next couple of weeks or so with the SEC tournament coming up.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think where things stand as of right now, Florida's probably going to be in that 2-seed spot. I don't know how all those tiebreakers and stuff work. Get into the roots of all that, and we'll be here for a while. That stuff gets complicated, but Todd Golden, he's done such a great job with that team. They play such a fun style too, just high-powered offensively. Not too many teams in the country that can score at the level that they do, and I think that they're going to be probably, without even seeing a bracket, I think I'm safely going to be putting them in my Final Four when it comes down to it, because I just like what I've seen out of this team so much all season long, and it's just hard to bet against them with the way that they're playing right now. Hopefully they take care of their business against Ole Miss in that regular season finale and don't get too caught up in the hoopla of that win against Alabama. But Blake, before we depart from this game, do we have any thoughts on Alabama that haven't already been said? I mean, this defense, it just continues to be extremely concerning for me. And when you're heading into the NCAA and SEC tournament still giving up points at the clip that they've been doing, and you can see Nate Oates, he's made comments about it in previous games like the Kentucky one about how they have to get better and they have to find toughness on that end. And it just kind of feels like they may not have the answer in that department this late into the season.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think like their defense is improving anytime soon, if at all, because I mean we're already 5 months into the season, 6 months into the season, and it's the same reoccurring issues. Like the lack of like locked inness, or I should say, lack of concentration on defense is kind of pathetic by Alabama, and like I don't know, it just doesn't seem like guys are like fully focused on defense, because I mean if you're letting up 90 plus points a game, yeah, that's just unacceptable. Like, I don't care what level of basketball you're playing. Well, okay, NBA obviously is 100 plus, basically dang near every game. But I mean, they're getting paid billions, millions, basically, to play the sport. But college wise, if you're letting up 90 plus, then I mean, it's just not a good sign at all.
Yeah, no, definitely not. And we'll see. I just feel like if they get matched up against a team that can kind of stunt what they want to do offensively in the tournament, it's going to be scary for them. I think that
Yeah.
it's going to have to be something like last year where they got really hot and they were able to just get what they wanted on offense for them to have like a run back to the Final Four. I think they're a safe bet for the second weekend, but whether they
Yeah.
can put themselves atop that group that finds their way into San Antonio at the Final Four, that's really going to depend on the matchups they get and if they decide to lock in on defense. Because if they ran into a team like maybe a St. John's that doesn't necessarily have the offense to keep up with them, but they have the defense, I think there's a team that could easily muck up a game with them and control the pace and find a way to spring an upset on them possibly. But I like what I've seen out of the team offensively, but defensively, yeah, lot to be desired there. You got to get some things fixed. But I'm going to backtrack over to Tuesday night. There were a couple more results in the SEC to talk about that were slightly more minor than the previous headlines we've discussed, and then we'll get on out of here. But Kentucky, they got right against LSU after the disappointing weekend versus Auburn. Really wasn't ever in question whatsoever. Not a whole lot to talk about game wise. I mean, everybody did their job. Senior night for UK. Walk-ons got their spotlight there at the end of the game with .2 left. When
Shout
the
out Zachary
yeah,
Tao.
shout out frat president Zachary Tao. He got his one shining moment. The refs decided that it was necessary to call a foul with .2 seconds left.
Yeah,
Well done again, college officials.
that was
But
bullshit.
yeah, I'm going off on a rant here. But let's just talk about Kentucky as we head into March. So they've got the game against Missouri coming up this weekend that we'll preview probably tomorrow. But I just want to, the injuries, they've obviously been a factor all season long. We got two definite answers in this past week in terms of injuries with Mark Pope's squad. Today he came out and said Kirk Reese's comeback chances are officially gone. The medical red shirt is out there for next year. I would assume that's probably the path that he's going to take, and I would assume that he'll be back at Kentucky. But Jackson Robinson's gone as well. That was announced on Saturday post the Auburn game. So, Blake, when we talk about Kentucky, we obviously have to put a little bit of an asterisk there because they're not fully healthy and they're not at full strength. But there's players on this team that are more than serviceable, and I think they're still capable of being a good team as we head down the stretch here. But with all things considered, what do we think's the new ceiling for this team heading into March when we talk about the NCAA tournament, the SEC tournament? Because obviously expectations kind of have to be adjusted when it comes to things like this.
Uh, it honestly is like matchup dependable. Like if they're playing a team like Drake in like the first round, then I mean Drake could potentially like knock them off. If they're playing who else should I say? If they're playing like a Michigan second round, then I think Kentucky wins that. So I mean, it really is like really matchup dependable. Uh, right now, I do think like where they're going to go out at is either round of 32 or Sweet 16. I don't see them going and being a first round exit. I mean, this team just has too much talent, even though they have lost some key guys with Kurt Creasa and Jackson Robinson going out. But I mean, like you said, this team's got more than serviceable players. Trent Noah, if he can start hitting shots uh, here going towards tourney play, then I think this team's ceiling elevates a little more because like him and Trent Perry, it's kind of hard with the role they've been given. I mean, they weren't expected to play like hardly at all, if at all, going into the season. So if they can chip in some production here going into SEC play, then going into March Madness, I do think they can make some noise because I mean their defense. It sucked against Auburn. It sucked against Alabama. But, I mean, here down the stretch, overall, it's been a lot more pleasing to the eye, I feel like. Like, Amari Williams looks really good right now. Andrew Carr has looked like his healthy self. Lamont Butler is starting to look a little better on both sides of the floor right now. So Otega Owe as well. I mean, he's starting to like after that LSU game, he looked phenomenal. So if he can be Mr. Consistent like he was all season, and if those other guys, and then you add in Ansley Almanor, I forgot to talk about him. He's been shooting at a crazy clip this season off the bench. So if he can come off the bench and help you with shooting, then I think this team's ceiling just elevates a whole nother level.
I will say the injuries to Lamont Butler and Jackson Robinson that they had been dealing with did give Travis Perry, Trent Noah, and those other guys the opportunity to get valuable minutes that I think
Yeah.
is going to benefit them as they head into the postseason here. But I really think the formula for how far this team can go, Otega always got to be Mr. Consistent still. Those double-digit performances that he had a long streak of, you've got to
Yeah.
see him keep that up and be efficient while doing it. You got to keep Lamont Butler and Andrew Carr healthy. They've had nagging issues all year long. Got to preserve their health because if Lamont goes down, then I think that's just an even worse hit probably than Jackson
Yeah.
Robinson going out for them because he's
If
the guy that really puts it all together, in my opinion, for that Kentucky team.
Yeah, if Lamont goes out somehow, like if he re-aggravates that shoulder here with tomorrow against Missouri or in the SEC play, I mean the team just goes way down off a cliff.
Mm-hmm.
Like Lamont Butler-less team just sucks. I'm not gonna lie to you because I mean they did it with Jackson Robinson being healthy. Like he was leading that team, and they looked
Mm-hmm.
really really good, honestly, but. You take away Lamont, and then you already have Jackson out. That team just goes down a whole different level. And yeah, I don't. If somehow, some way, I'm not trying to put it into the air, but if Lamont goes down, then that team sucks.
Yeah, the priorities for Mark Pope have to be Lamont being healthy, Otega Away continuing to be efficient. Got to keep Andrew Carr healthy too, and Amari Williams. He's been playing really some of the best basketball that we've seen out of him all season long. These last
Yeah,
couple of games, if he can keep playing at the rate he is, being physical in the paint, getting on the boards, and being a go-to guy in that paint area, that could be important for them. And another thing too, Kobe Brea, he's got to step up with Jackson Robinson out now. Like those
yeah,
shot creating abilities that Jackson contain, those all have to go to Kobe Brea now. And Kobe, he's more of a spot up shooter, really. That's kind of been his MO for his college career. He's shown flashes of being able to create his own space, and we've seen him hit crazy step back shots and whatnot. But I think it's going to be very important, Blake, that Kobe Brea, as his role elevates, that his production elevates as well, because you got to find a way to replace that scoring output from Jackson Robinson somehow, and Kobe's definitely capable of it.
yeah. I agree. And like tomorrow per se, uh, if Kobe Gray isn't hitting shots, I don't think this team's going to beat Missouri. They're just too well rounded. And Kobe Bray's biggest struggle, I feel like this season, has been hitting shots on the road. You look
Mm-hmm.
at the like split, shooting split difference between home and away. He's shooting like 50%, 51% from three at home, and then you compare that to the away splits, and he's shooting 29% from three. So that's a drastic difference. About almost all his stats besides points are like similar, but that 3-point percentage is a huge red flag. So, I mean, if they're not playing, they're not going to be playing at home in the SEC tourney. They're not going to be playing at home against NCAA or in the NCAA tournament. Like, he's going to have to learn how to hit shots in big environments like he did at Dayton with, I think it was last year in that Dayton run or 2 years ago. I forget when it was. But if he can hit shots, some big shots down the stretch here, then this team's ceiling, like I said, will elevate a whole different level.
And I know you said when it comes to the NCAA tournament, you didn't see a first round exit being possible. Now, I don't expect that by any means. And this could just be the PTSD of being a UK fan since 2021 talking here. But if they get the wrong matchup against a mid major
It's
that can
possible.
expose that, yeah, that can expose those defensive problems we've seen, then I would not be shocked if they went out in round one. I
Yeah.
don't I don't necessarily expect them to, but I can definitely see the blueprint that's there just with how we've had questions about them defensively. But over the last month, I mean, they really have stepped it up defensively and have looked better at times. So I think that concern maybe isn't as blatantly apparent as it was at one point. But this health situation for Mark Pope, it's been tricky all season long trying to consistently swap out guys and figure out what your rotation is going to be. And then there's another setback, and now you've got 2 season-ending injuries confirmed. I mean, it's been tough for Pope in year one, but all things considered, he's done an amazing job with what he's been given in the hand he's been dealt. Not many first-year coaches can find a way to overcome all that. But moving on from Kentucky into one of our last segments of the day, Arkansas. They beat Vandy on Tuesday night. Now they're going to meet against Mississippi State this weekend. So, Blake, I'll take this to you here. Are the Hogs in where we stand right now, or will it take some work in Nashville to ensure that happens?
Dude, it's hard to tell just because of how weak the bubble is. I think Arkansas gets in. If they win this game, I think they have to win this game against Mississippi State at home. And if they don't, then I don't know if I see them making it.
Lenardi has them as one of the last 4 buys as of today. So.
Hold on, let me see the bracketology real quick. I gotta look at it just to make sure I'm not saying anything stupid.
I don't know how historically accurate Joey Brackets is when it comes to the bubble talk, but I mean, he believes in the Razorbacks at least.
We're the last 4 in. And then Oklahoma, Xavier, North Carolina, and Texas are looking from the outside.
Me personally, I think they need to win Saturday.
I think they need to win Saturday too. I think they sneak in though. I do think they finish it off strong and get in.
I think they may not win on Saturday because they're going to be playing a Mississippi State team that's pissed off, and Mississippi State's still a very good team in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I think they may get a win in Nashville. There may be 2 that will bolster their resume and kind of get them into the field. But this bubble this year overall, it's really weak. So let's just go ahead and cut out the NCAA tournament expansion talk, please. I don't know why it's
ever a thing.
Yeah, look at the bubble this year and then tell me with a straight face that the tournament needs to be expanded. But we'll save that for another day.
NCAA officials, please give us an expanded bubble. Give us an expanded bracket, please. Please, I'm begging you. The bubble sucks. Give us
said no one ever. Yep, exactly. Well, Blake, it was a big time week in the Southeastern Conference. We've got a big weekend coming up that we'll be previewing in full here in the next day. But for now, I'm signing out to go watch some mid-major conference tournament action because this is what I live for. But Luke Tackett, Blake Smith, Full Court Trap Podcast, signing out.